Hello, animators and artists. Allissoon Lockhart is a line producer at Glitch Productions and BRIKK. With over a decade of experience in the animation industry, Allissoon also runs classes which cover the animation production pipeline from pitching and development to design, storyboards, animation, and post production. If you want to know how to schedule and budget a TV series, she is who you turn to. So we invited Allissoon onto our live stream to discuss her career in animation, the courses she offers, and why the production process is worth careful consideration. Allissoon, welcome to the stream.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. And if I'm looking over here at any point, by the way, you're over here for me. So hello everyone.
So, Allissoon, let's start this off with an introduction. Can you tell us about your origin story and your path to your current role in animation?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And we're gonna learn through this live stream that I am not a very concise person. So I will try to make my origin story more compact. But yeah, I'm originally from Seattle, Washington. So not Washington, DC. I'm from the Twilight, Nirvana, Grey's Anatomy, Seattle. So I grew up there, and then I went to college in LA. And if you're gonna do anything animation or whatnot, LA is the place to be. But when I was growing up, though, I wanted to do music, which if you know me or follow me online, like that's a pretty obvious thing. Like I love music. I love talking about bands and all that kind of stuff. But I actually grew up being really cool, and I was doing marching band, and I play woodwind, so I play saxophone, flute, clarinet. I play French horn. That was a really fun one for me because my dream was to be in movie orchestras. I had a very different than veterinarian and all the other ones that young kids had. I was like, I want to be in a movie orchestra. And funny enough, my family is not very music positive, which is very strange knowing me now. So I did kind of fall to my second love that I'm sure I share with a lot of you of cartoons and movies and video games. And I have an older brother, so we were always constantly getting the opposite Pokemon so we could all trade and get the full Pokedex and stuff like that. So yeah, so when I went to college, I did kind of want to go for music, but I really fell in love with what I ended up doing, which was games and animation, and kind of stayed over there. But what I loved doing in college, and not to immediately give career advice immediately, but I say yes to a lot of things. So thankfully, I was in Los Angeles, so I was kind of anytime there was like a student film set or there was a get together or somebody needed help on something, like I always wanted to go. I always wanted that hands-on experience. And that's kind of like networking in real life. And that's what I was doing. And I ended up meeting somebody who, this is my origin story, randomly texted me. And this is going to sound so LA, and I apologize, but it's 100% true. They texted me and they asked, hey, do you speak Japanese? Which I've learned from high school and college. I'm definitely not fluent, but I can a little bit speak it. We need a PA on set who can speak Japanese. And I was like, well, okay, yeah, I'll be there. So I ended up driving to what I think is another student film, another small set. It ended up being Interstellar, which was bonkers crazy. So
Oh,
I
wow.
ended up I ended up asking my teachers when I found that out. I went back to my first class the next day, and I was like, I have to take the next 2 weeks off. It's very important. I'll do all the work outside of it. And they were super, super cool, which was great. So I did a couple weeks there, and just once again, just emphasize the power of networking in this crazy LA story. I met somebody on set while we're all eating, food at the crafty table. And I was really young. I was, in college, like 18, and they were like, so what do you want to do in the industry? Striking up conversation with me. And at that time, I really wanted to get into stop motion. Like, I grew up loving Robot Chicken. Once again, I have an older brother, so I always, there's the Christmas specials every year, the Rankin and Bass stuff. So I loved stop motion. So I just say that to him. I was like, it'd be really cool, one day to work in stop motion. And he was just like, oh, well, I just came from working at Shadow Machine. I can give them your email if you want. And of course, Looney Tune style, my jaw hits the floor. But I give it to him and I think nothing. I'm like, cool, I will never hear from this person again. And then 6 months later, I got called and was in Shadow Machine painting puppets. So it really just happened from like, I'm not from a family, like my dad's not some insane person. Both of my parents do not work in the industry. I'm the black sheep where they call me sometimes and they're like, where are you now? Like, they don't understand the, like, jumping from place to place, but I just say yes to a lot of things and network. And yeah, I worked 10 years in LA now. I've been very fortunate of, you know, jumping on stuff, saying yes to things. I've definitely had my ups and downs, as everybody right now or, in the past has too. And I went to England last year, so I left LA and now I'm out here in Sweden. So yeah, it's been a long journey and I still have all of those instruments over there, by the way. I still have my saxophone right in the corner. But yeah, it's kind of my origin of wanted to do this thing, pivoted, still do it and love it, and met really great people along the way. That was kind of long. I tried to make that concise.
Okay, that's really cool. What I wanted to ask you, I talked to a lot of artists and animators about their work in animation. I really want to ask you, what does a typical day look like for you as a line producer?
Yeah, so if you don't know what a line producer is, I'm talking to everybody because I'm sure Mike does, but you're kind of you're up near the top, and it's usually a term for TV. So there's literally a line when you look at the production pipe, not pipeline, but hierarchy. So there's the above the line people, which are like the creator of the show, your executive producers, people who put in money, studio heads, somebody, you know, the showrunner, director sometimes, so people are above the line. And then below the line, you start to have the line producer, the associate producer, I'm going down now, associate producer, production manager, supervisor. So we don't really call it a below the line producer because that would be not the nicest term, right? So it is kind of the person running production, making sure everything's going. So my day is different every day. I am there to support everybody below me, but I'm also there to support the showrunner. I'm definitely talking to them every day. So what I think is really cool, and that's why it's a hard question to answer, is when we do, especially TV, which I mainly work in, we have episodes going. It's called waterfalling. So and maybe later we'll look at a schedule, but all the episodes are kind of happening in tandem, usually 3 of them kind of at a time because we have 3 storyboard teams. So there might be a day, what I'm getting at is there might be a day where I'm ushering people to go to a voice record and, we got to do circle takes for our main character. And then later in the morning, we have a storyboard launch because we're starting episode 2. And then later in the day, I have to call our partner animation studio because maybe we work with a studio in Ireland or Canada or something like that. After lunch, I might have to go to, an art review for, character approvals and stuff like this. So I don't give creative as a line producer, and production people normally don't, but I'm here to facilitate, help creative, and definitely problem solve and look ahead. So most of my career previous to this, like definitely back in LA, was in post-production. So I'm very used to every day walking in and there's a new thing going on, hopefully not a problem, but sometimes yes, and problem solving it. So I kind of like that my day is different every day, but being around the same production people and whatnot. So yeah, it depends on where we are.
Yeah, so Allison, you teach courses about animation production, and I wanted to ask you, like on a broad level, how is learning about animation production different from learning how to animate? And why is that a skill that maybe people working in the industry might want to know about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like this question because they're different, but they're definitely similar. I think the difference is, we were kind of talking before getting to know each other. Like when you're an artist, and I'm not, to be very, very clear, I've always been in the production field. You know, you might be drawing, you're, 8 hours a day, you're pumping hard at a really cool TV show, a really cool movie, and you can go home and draw on your own OCs or your own comic or your own cartoon show pitch. Production people usually aren't going home and like, oh boy, I'm gonna work on my spreadsheet that I'm really excited about. That's not usually what we do. So a lot of the like training, like, yes, you can learn programs, and the big one that we use a lot in some of the bigger studios is ShotGrid. So it's kind of this huge library asset making. It does so many things, we can't go into it right now. So there are programs, to be very clear, but a lot of it is like situational. And I think some people call those quote unquote soft skills. I don't really like that term. They're just skills. They're just different types of skills. And they really are kind of, as I mentioned, I'm such a, from my origin story and whatnot, I'm such a big, hands-on learning from, things that you've done well, things that you've not done well. And those are the kind of things that in production are the hardest things to learn, is situational stuff. The stressful thing that we had to get through, this milestone that we missed. How did the person above me handle that? How did we all rally around the problem and stuff like that? So it is, knowing the technical skills. There's a lot of production documents that we learn, and I do teach about them in my class. There's things that design coordinators do that are different than what storyboard coordinators do, that are different than what post-production people do. But it definitely is learning those problem solving and communication stuff that is probably different than just putting in hours to anatomy or putting into hours of these animation skills. They're just different.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, because when you're working on animated productions, a lot of people wind up specializing in a specific trade. You'll become um, a character animator or an effects animator. You'll be doing cleanup, but it's also a team sport. You need to know what's happening next in the production pipeline. You need to know how to hand things off, how to get feedback, how to take feedback. And those are some things that sometimes they do teach you a little bit of an animation school, um, but you don't always get the full picture of how to run a studio production.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was kind of like a little bit of the origin of why I started the class. But I was in the same boat too, because when I think my like officially what my fancy piece of paper says is I think I think it's like interactive media. I should remember it, but I don't do it is essentially what I'm getting at. Because like it was in the gaming department of where I was at, and I do not know how to code either. And that was kind of a weird moment for me in school, because I I don't code, and that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I liked the art and the animation. So I was always kind of like sneaking into like, yes, like the cinematics and stuff like that. But like, I was always kind of like sneaking over to the animation school and trying to get into the classes. But they were actually teaching like boarding and animation, which like I did have fun doing. You definitely should not ask me to draw, but I was learning, squash and stretch and all that kind of stuff too. But I didn't know nobody ever mentioned the word production except in the sense of like making like, oh, animators work in production. And I was like, oh, okay. But it was only until, and once again, from my origin story, like there was the little bit of live action and then into stop motion. It really was stop motion, which is kind of, the child of live action and animation together, that I was interacting with like, oh, this person's a puppet coordinator. They're not making the puppets, but they're like deciding when the puppet needs to be delivered to that stage, or this, like they're storyboard coordinators in stop motion too. And that's when I was starting to be like, oh, there's people who make items and facilitate and coordinate, that's why we use that word, for the artist. And I really thought that was really cool, and how I could find my place. Because when you're in college, the daunting task of like, oh, I've never drawn in my life, and I'm in this storyboard class with people who have been drawing since they could hold a crayon. I was like, oh no, this is really daunting, and you get that kind of imposter syndrome. But then I was like, oh, there's this like creative fun in production. And I wish, in the roundabout way of just getting to it, Mike, is I wish more colleges and universities talked about production. I really do. And all the other positions like editing for animation, we talked about like compositing, all these like things that just aren't you know, nothing against storyboarding or animating, but there's so many cool people and so many cool job titles that make the show.
I think maybe one of the best ways of like thinking about what the benefits of thinking carefully about the production are thinking about how it can go wrong. So like what kinds of problems can productions run into without the kind of careful planning and coordination?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, and I was thinking about this the other day too, because we, you know, constantly whenever you're on a project or whatnot, you always want to look ahead. You always want to, you know, think forwardly. And the thing that in my past that is kind of like, you know, bitten us and you know made things a little bit veer off, because the main things that we, you know, production, and I'm not, you know, trying to boil it down into two things, but it becomes, you know, that, yeah, triangle of quality, time, and money. And time and money are what we're looking at. You know, we don't want to get off budget and we don't want to get off schedule. And if we get off schedule, it inevitably affects the budget because we have to have people for longer. That's just, you know, a very, very simple with exceptions way of looking at it. But I think what does, like, as I was saying a second ago, has bitten us in the past is not preparing for production time. And what I mean by that is you can't just say like, oh, this design breakdown is due, these designs are due Friday, and they're, you know, then they need to be shipped on Friday as well. Shipped as in like sent to maybe an overseas studio, which we do in LA a lot. No, somebody in between, there's multiple people in between the artist turning it in and it being in, you know, Ireland's hands. So many people need to touch that. So a lot of the times I've seen shows that just think one person hands it to the next person and then it's done. But really it's like a day for, you know, the production person to fill out, you know, a lead sheet and write down all the design names. You know, we have animation timers and animation checkers. So those are people making exposure sheets. Those are people checking those exposure sheets against the storyboards. So it's not like properly planning for, it might seem like minimal time or time that, oh, well, it's not drawing time, or, oh, it's not actual like concrete editing time. But, you know, like whenever I write my schedules, I always break out the time that the coordinator needs to do this, the time that the editor needs to render stuff. Oh my gosh, rendering times always sneak up on people too. So it's like the more detailed you can be with the planning, it is always so much better to have people not have enough to do than have people have way too much to do and we slip days, because slipping days costs us money. And we want to save that money for making the show a little bit better at the end. That's always the joy.
I think what's also really interesting too is that like that those steps, the things that you're waiting for in production time, can be very different from like production to production depending on all kinds of different things. Like if you're working with a studio, it still deals with like drawing on paper and pencil. Suddenly there are manila envelopes that have to move around.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, and
I
I
wanted to
remember
ask you
at
actually.
Crunchyroll. Oh, sorry.
Oh, continue if you want to continue. You can continue.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I was just gonna join on the physical thing too, because everything's so digital. And of course, right now we're talking to Toon Boom, which is like all those fun programs. But like when you're talking about exposure sheets, which Harmony does use, and I've used them for retakes in the past at Bento Box, but at Crunchyroll, it was very, very hands-on. We had big like the classic exposure sheets. They're bigger than a normal printer piece of paper.
Oh
They're
heck yeah.
very big and have all the, you know, like frame counts on them. But not planning, which we did plan in, but if you had not planned in the time to scan all of those so we could send them to South Korea, like that would have, you know, you would have lost days on the schedule to that. So 100% agree with what you just said of like, if you're physically sending stuff, you got to think of the mail, all of that kind of like things that you don't normally think about. So true, Mike. So true.
We got a message from Martin at HTAP asking, what's the strongest attribute studios usually look for in a line producer role? And what is one thing people take for granted with the role?
Ooh, oh my God. This is a complex question out of the gate. One best attributes for a line producer. I think it's knowing the full pipeline. So you maybe heard me kind of say it a second ago where there's this concept of shipping, and it happens everywhere. And those co-productions, you have, you know, different studios doing different parts of the pipeline, you know, coming together. It could be for a financial reason, it could be, you know, to get grants or anything like that. But a lot of the shops, studios in LA do outsource animation, which is really sad. Like I really wish people more everywhere we did end-to-end stuff. But that kind of limits production people, because that means for pre-production, we do script to animatics. So, you know, that's everybody involved in the writing room. Designs, of course, are included kind of in between that's, and then storyboarding. So design coordinators, color coordinators, storyboard coordinators. So once we ship, maybe you're doing 10 episodes, right? Once the 10th episode goes out the door, we roll off those people. We don't keep them around for those, you know, excuse me, long time that the animation is happening somewhere else. And then we hire usually, and it's for a couple different reasons. Post is a bit more, I want to say technical, as in it's harder. It's just different skill sets than a design coordinator and a post-production coordinator. Absolutely, you can do both, but they are usually a bit different, and we look for people who've kind of worked in those fields. So once you get higher up is what I'm getting to. Having a line producer who knows what happens from script to delivery on broadcast or delivery on streamer is really, really important, because sometimes you get stuck in pre and sometimes you get stuck in post. So that's my behoovance to everybody, that you should look at every part of the pipeline. You know, if you can swing over to post-production, it's super, super fun. If you're in post-production and you really want to, you know, do some storyboard coordinating or design coordinating, like break down those walls that are weirdly kind of there, because that's how you really
ask me about things that, you know, kind of, you know, run into problems and things that sway the schedule and
Oh,
budgets.
Allison, your audio is glitching again. Would you be able to refresh, and we'll continue the conversation?
For sure. Do that, you know, refresh.
Unfortunately, no. All right, we'll be back in just a second.
Am I back? Hello.
Hey, Allison, welcome back.
Hello.
Sorry about that for the audience. We have a bit of a distance involved, but we're back online. So we were currently talking about attributes that studios look for in a line producer role, and you were talking about the difference between producing for post-production and producing for pre-production.
Yeah, so yeah, like essentially they're a little bit different, and a lot of people get weirdly stuck on one side just because a lot happens in pre-production in the LA US shops, you know, like everything, like I said, like design, storyboarding, color, all that kind of stuff. Then there's that big gap, and I'm doing this because I'm imagining a waterfall schedule. So like you have the gap of the animation, and eventually you start to have it come back. It's like a boomerang, if you will, the shipping. And then post-production starts. So usually new people are coming on for post. So a lot of studios that want a really strong line producer, and if you're looking for that and interested in doing that, I would definitely say try to break through that wall and learn both sides of the production, because a line producer is on for the whole time. So, you know, you don't want to all of a sudden encounter post-production and be like, I don't know what happens here, because I will tell you a lot of the other people will also look at you and be like, I don't know what happens here. So you know, you usually at the studios and on a show, you want to be somebody who can know what happens, hire a good post-production supervisor and stuff like that. So that's really number one, because I usually encounter a lot of people that have done one, you know, which other side you're on, but not the other. There was a second part of this question too, and I don't remember what it was, but that's my biggest
Oh,
one.
the second part of the question was, what is one thing that people take for granted with the line producer role?
Take for granted. Oh, I think it, I don't even know if this is just might be a me philosophy thing. Like, and it's kind of like position you get to, like, you know, director, line producer, showrunner, like those are all, and I'm very blessed to be one. Like, it's a very high up position. So remembering where you came from, remembering how it felt to be a production assistant, a coordinator, you know, all the long nights that you've been through and all that kind of stuff. Like, Like, it's never a mentality of, you know, well, I want other people to feel the way that I did. Maybe you were in a good environment, maybe you were in a bad environment. I think it's no matter where you get in your position of, you know, it is line producer like me, or like I said, one of the creative art director, whatever, like, yeah, always looking out for the people below you. That's why you're there. That's why, you know, like, I'm not taking notes in meetings anymore. I mean, I take notes for myself because I forget everything, but like, you know, like, I'm not at that production assistant coordinator role anymore because I'm there to protect those people. I'm there to teach them. I want them to get up to my role, so then when I retire, I can watch all their cool shows. You know, it's about supporting the people below you, and I'm a really, really big advocate for that. So
Yeah, I think it's really important to give people opportunities to grow and learn and take on other roles in productions because you never know who you're going to be relying on in the next production.
oh my God, that too, yeah, and always, you know, like, building people up, and like, that's like the most fun thing too, is like, you know, once you get higher up, you know, you learn to delegate, and you are making that team and stuff like that. Like, you know, what I loved when I was a coordinator was being trusted with stuff, like being like, hey, this is your thing, own it. Like, I know you got it. Like, I've had so many line producers that to this day I still talk to, and like, I look up to them so much because they, and you said it perfectly, Mike, they've given me that opportunity. And but then nobody else, you know, no one's like standing over my shoulder. I get to come into the, you know, the catch up meeting, or the, you know, like, when we're all debriefing about what's going on, and be like, Allissoon, you know, how's it going with that thing, you know, whatever it was, and then you get to answer. That feels so good. And like, I always want other people to have that, where it's like, yeah, like, you're in charge of that, own it.
I think for a lot of artists, the sort of nuts and bolts of production can be a little bit mysterious, and it's sort of something that like maybe happens to you, but you don't know why. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've encountered about animation production, and how should artists think about that process?
Yeah, I think the other than the one that's like, when you talk to someone that's not an artist, like my mother or someone, like, usually they think that you draw, and like, no. So other than that misconception that I to this day have to tell people I don't do, I think there's a weird misconception that production is easy. Um, and I can get why, I guess, just because, once again, like, it's not using a specific program, like, you know, I wouldn't know what to do in Maya or stuff like that. But I always like to phrase it where production is not easy, and it's something that everybody can do, because I always like to keep production inclusive. It is something that you can do. You can learn how to do production just as you can learn how to storyboard and you can animate. But that doesn't mean to say that it's something that right now you sit down and boom, you could do a production manager's job. And I think that's the misconception. It's just like, oh, well, you just make lists, or oh, you just, you know, you just organize things, or oh, you file structure. Like, I do that for my own projects or stuff like that. And it's like, no, we do a lot. And what we're here to do is to go into the next misconception, is that I always hear that production is against creative. So in some places, and you know, always fighting against it, it's very production against artists and artists against production. And I really don't like that mentality, because we're both masters of our own craft. Like, yes, there's these skills of, you know, like I mentioned earlier, soft skills, don't like that term, but, you know, like communication and problem solving and whatnot. But there are technical things that we learn how to do. We learn how to make retake sheets. We learn how to make, you know, design breakdowns, lead sheets, animation shot lists, all that kind of stuff, to aid you guys, or you as in the artists and stuff like that. It's because we all can't do everything at once, or, you know, no drawing would get done, no production would get done. So it's a very, like, you know, there's always this like, oh, well, production doesn't want the show to look good. Production does, you know, all they're thinking about is time and all that kind of stuff. No, we are all a part of the, you even said it earlier, Mike, and I love it. It's a team sport. And that's what production is too. And I think that gets somehow forgotten, but we're all there to do it. Just because some of us aren't pens on paper, you know, your editors, you know, your people in HR, your directors, you know, the PAs, everybody is there. and a part of the show. We all make the show, not just the people drawing the characters.
Yeah. So I've asked a couple questions that are sort of from an artist's perspective. I'm going to ask you a question from Toon Boom's perspective. Um, when do productions decide what software they'll use on a project, and what kinds of considerations go into those sorts of discussions?
It's very early on because we definitely, when we're hiring, and I'm sure, you and everybody else who's looked at a job ad before and whatnot for shows at various places, it'll say we're looking for someone proficient in this. Very much so now with my time, because I mentioned earlier, sometimes in the States, depending where you are, we don't do a lot of animation in-house, but I am now in Sweden, which is why Mike maybe has me refresh my microphone, is because we're so far away. We do animation in-house, so I've been around animators. They're real. Oh my gosh. And definitely having those individuals on the same program, I have learned super helps because you're exporting PNG sequences or target sequences or whatever you're doing. Like rough animation, we're a little bit allowed to be flexible. Like it's okay whether you swing to one another, but when you have people in an assembly line really trying to get shots done, because and especially where I work right now, we do a lot of really cool trailers and ads, and you can look them up, BRIKK.com. We do cool stuff. We have really fast deadlines in advertisements, which has been super big adjustment for me, but I've been taught by these amazing producers. We have to have everybody on the same thing. We can't have, oh no, this PNG sequence it's not alphaing correctly, so then somebody can't clean it up and then somebody can't color it. So it is really early on. We want to make sure that everybody is lining up on the same thing, and usually who's deciding it is the animation director, or the art director. So I will say, not to shout out Toon Boom, but I've never encountered something else for storyboarding. It's always Storyboard Pro. In my 10 years, I've never had a offshoot of that, except somebody who does it on paper. So they're archaic Storyboard Pro. But then after that, of course, there's numerous animation ones. But yeah, it's definitely whatever whoever's leading the charge thinks it's going to be the most proficient and most people encountering. It's usually the animation department that we really want to sync people up on. Yeah.
Allissoon, you run courses teaching people about animation production, as well as advanced courses where you get a little bit more into the weeds. Can you tell us a little bit about those classes?
Yeah, absolutely. Those have been so fun. I started them when I was leaving England. God, that was like a year ago. We were at the 1 year anniversary. Wow, how fun. And then once I think I mentioned it earlier, it came from that thing of like, I didn't have that in college, and then I was in England and I was at a game studio, so I was kind of missing my animation roots. Of course, like it's fun to dabble. As I said, I say yes to a lot of things. It was fun to dabble in games, and I have Pokemon tattoos all over me, so I love video games. But I kind of got to the end of my time in England. I knew I was going over to Sweden. I was like to get back into animation, and I was like, I think I want to like talk about production. Like I've been in game production, which is very different, still very fun, but it's agile. It's a very different way of thinking. So it kind of came from that, and then just this idea of like, man, nobody talks about production. Nobody talks about production. So I kind of just like, like I didn't know who was going to come. I didn't know what was going on. But the second I started like writing down, like, and I had a bit of time off that I was using too from my job to run these courses. So I was like, yeah, it'd be really cool to do the full pipe. It all started to fall into place because I didn't know how many I was going to do originally. And then it ended up being 11. So there's 11 courses that you can check out. We do everything at the top of the pipeline of development because I do a lot of consulting on movies and TV shows. I pitch. I have 3 of my own shows I pitch, but now I'm on like producing a bunch of other stuff. So I write decks a lot. So there's a class on like what goes on with making a pitch deck, who would you talk to, all that kind of stuff, to the actual production pipeline. So design, storyboarding, animation and shipping, post-production. We have some fun classes. We do not storyboarding, we do, but stop motion, because of course I had to bring back my love of stop motion. We talk about music videos at one point. We talk about what's the difference between TV and movies. And then this year anniversary, one of my students, Martin, kind of gave me the idea of like, you should do another one of those, and you should do the advanced, like, so we can do more of the workshops. Because even in the original 11, when you sign up, you get all the materials. Like, I give you a lead sheet, we do some stuff, but there wasn't really enough time, which is hilarious because they're supposed to be 3 hours long. But as you already can tell from this live stream, I love talking. So they ended up being like 4 hours long. So Martin was very politely was kind of like, hey, like, you should do like another class where we like really go into, like you said, like, get into the weeds, get into the grass. So that's what these lately these 6 classes have been, of the advanced. So we did a full budgeting and scheduling for movies, for TV shows. We've done design, storyboarding. We finally did animation. So we actually did talk about hiring rough animators, tie-down animators, how you kind of schedule out animation where it is a bit mathematical, but also people are humans. So we have to build in, once again, those production practices of not everybody is churning out, the exact same amount of seconds per week. We have to, be human about it. And then our last class is actually this coming Sunday, which is post-production. So I'm very excited about that because, once again, I've worked in post for a long time. So yeah, it's just been really rewarding. Everybody gets like a certificate at the end. And I never saw myself, once again, I wanted to be a movie orchestra person. I never was like, I'm going to be a teacher one day. But it's been really nice, and everybody's super, super cool. And it's cool hearing like what people are into, and there's people from all over the world. We have people from Finland and Mexico and Canada and Australia. So it's been a really, really, really fun time. So yeah, you can check out the libraries, and then the advanced library will be available in December too. So yeah, it's crazy. It's so much of me talking though. Just know that. So much of me talking.
So, who do you have a sense of like who takes your classes? Does it tend to be more people who are working in the industry, people who are already in production, people who are artists, or people who are just kind of curious about how the production works?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's always fun. So like I said, like, there's people from all over. So there's a lot of different studio backgrounds. So I do have people that I do have artists that are interested in seeing the production side. Maybe they do want to take a job as a production assistant or coordinator for whatever reason. A lot of the first round of classes, so those 11 that I mentioned that happened kind of last year that you can get the recordings of. Yeah, it's people who are interested in animation fans, people who are maybe on indie projects, so they've never been at the studio system, or kind of vice versa. But yeah, the first classes was a little bit more of a spread of different people. But now these advanced ones, it's really cool seeing either people come back. I definitely have some repeat people, which is very, very fun. And I know how to say their names properly, so that's great. But it is a lot more people that are in the coordinator role or a little bit higher. So that's kind of cool because it's people that are asking a little bit more difficult question, which is, I guess, why I called it advanced class. So that's been the new thing about these last ones. But yeah, it's kind of been a full gambit of things. And I always do Q&As at the end, so no one needs to feel like, oh, well, I've never worked on a show, like I'm not going to know what Allison's talking about or anything like that. Like, I think any person who's taken one or any of the classes can attest that I over-explain things probably, and that, any question I'll stay back and answer. And it's pretty easy to follow, and it's beneficial too if you are coming from the artist side, on the Toon Boon side and all that kind of stuff. Like, definitely helpful to know what production people are doing for you, and not that you can have them do their job and help you, but if you like, hey, can I actually get this thing, like, you'll be kind of knowledgeable of like what you should have and stuff like that from a good production crew. So it's good to lift the curtain.
We got a question in the chat from Lyndon. Lyndon is asking if you can suggest any festivals, networking events, or other sort of communities for producers.
Ooh, for specifically producers,
Where do you go to network?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's obviously, like, we're in a very digital age. There are a lot of like online groups and discords and stuff like that. I'm even trying to like keep up on the one, and I know this is a bit of a luxury, so I'm sorry if I'm mentioning something that's super, super, super far away from you. The one that I've had the best networking and just meeting all sorts of people, all sorts of studios is Annecy. It is the one that's in France every year. Obviously, I understand that that's way closer if you live in Europe rather than Los Angeles.
Just go to France.
Yeah, just go to France and you'll get a job. No, but there's like Lightbox in LA has always been super, super fun. Some film festivals are great. Like I just did, I'm going to shout them out, but I just did a talk at the Thessaloniki, which is in Greece, animation festival. So there are animation festivals everywhere, and you know, different people are coming in. Of course, there's local people and stuff like that. So you know, if you can go in person and you feel comfortable, you feel safe, like all that kind of stuff. Like I'm a very face-to-face kind of a person, so that's really fun. But definitely, you know, organizations, groups, you know, word of mouth from people. You know, women in animation is also amazing for networking. But producing wise, if you're actually talking about like trying to raise funds, financing, Honesty is kind of the big one. GamesCon is great if you're looking for games work and stuff like that, because a lot of the game studios are there if you're trying to get like, you know, trailers, stuff like that. And then MIPCOM, MIPCOM, which I think is also in France. I don't know why they're all in France. Is really big
There's also like
co-production.
Cartoon Studio and Cartoon Movie and Cartoon Forum, I believe.
Yeah, and there's a couple in England too. But yeah, MIPCOM is a big like co-production, like trying to get financing one. But yeah, there's Cartoon Forum, and there's one in England, and I feel so bad for not. It's a kids one. Is it Kids Screen? Something like that. There's a
It might
big
be
one
Kids
in the
Screen.
UK. It is. Oh, is it?
I believe so.
Yeah, I
And
think so.
for East Coast United States and East Coast Canada, I can really recommend the Ottawa International Animation Festival. Has the animation conference attached to it,
Oh,
which
nice.
I think is really good on the production side too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing too, and like I'm not gonna know for every region and when I wish I did. I wish that was just like I'd be like a band. I'd be just like traveling from festival to festival. But yeah, like going to that one in Greece was super, super fun. I know there's a ton in Ireland as well. So like look around at, you know, where you are yourself and see if there is a festival. Because yeah, while it might be fun films and of course that could get you inspired and all that kind of stuff, there's also going to be people there that either are interested in the same thing, working in the same thing as you, know maybe you have that moment of having lunch with somebody and then saying like, I want to work in 3D animation and I want to make the next Arcane. And then the person next to you is like, that's cool. I worked on that and I want to do that too. Like, you know, random examples, but like that's networking at its finest, is just being loud and proud about what you want to do and new places with new people.
From your point of view, what are the most like interesting or challenging aspects of being a line producer?
Oh God. You the challenging part is you are up at the top, which and it's not an ego thing, but it's like you're the person that everybody comes to for questions, which is, you know, great. And you know, you should be up there with your experience, you know, like, you know, I would be able to tell you the things that definitely have not worked from either, you know, things I've tried or things that I've experienced from studios I've been at. I can tell you the things that did work and, you know, have been incorporated into how I do production and production pipelines and stuff like that. But, you know, it's difficult because you feel like you can't ask questions. And no matter where you are in your career, this is another one of those, like, whether you're the director, you're the showrunner, you're the, you know, lead voice actor, whoever you are, like, you can always ask questions. We are always learning in our careers all the way until you're 90 or 100, or maybe you live to be 200. That's kind of the challenge, is that feeling of like you're alone, that you're the only person who should, you know, like you're up there on your mountain and you can't ask questions. It's a team. It's a team. Like I think the biggest thing, of, like I said earlier, about being a line producer is, you know, yes, keeping the show on track, delivering it, you know, that's your job, but, you know, to protect and help the people around you. But it is still a team. You're going to learn from people at you know, you're going to learn from a production assistant, you're going to learn from coordinators, you're going to learn from people in general. So I think that's the hardest thing. I think sometimes it's hard because the days are so different that you're getting pulled from thing to thing. So it's definitely nice to like have your grounded. Some people like their mornings, some people like their evenings. I definitely like to have the morning to settle myself up. I also like to, on Mondays and Fridays, send out, hey, this is what we're doing this week, this is where we're looking ahead, all that kind of stuff. And then on Fridays, I also like to definitely celebrate what we've accomplished. If this cool thing got solved, we finished a whole sequence of storyboarding, we locked the cut, something like that. Celebrate what happened in the week, but then also look ahead at the next week. So yeah, so it's kind of like, those are the hard things, is you're balancing many plates. The line producer is in charge of all the departments, and I'm depending on the people below me. I'm learning from them. I'm their teammate, but I'm depending on them to give me the accurate information and stuff like that. So it's a very stressful job. I think the line producer should be the last person to leave. I don't like leaving coordinators or PAs. I mean, if something's rendering, that's fine, but like I don't like having people be alone in the office, whether it's digitally or physically. So it is a demanding job. It's stressful, but it's very rewarding when you have a good group of people that can pick up anything at the moment's notice to help out each other. So it's difficult. It's long days. But the product we make at the end is everything. And to me, to make sure my showrunner is not focusing on the stuff that I'm handling, like all the stuff that me and my coordinators and managers are doing, if they can focus, they can focus on telling the best story and doing all that, that makes the more stressful parts worth it.
Do you have any advice for artists who want to know more about the production pipeline, or resources for like knowing more about animation production?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely a proponent of if you're on the art side and want to learn about production, doing it. Whether you want to step into a production role at any point, of course, I'm well aware that there are even production people that want to do art, like totally, like I like doing music, and stuff like that. Like, there are tons of amazing design coordinators I know that want to go into concept art one day or stuff like that. But there is, like I mentioned a bit earlier, so I won't go into it again, but there is just something about lifting back the curtain and knowing like why we're doing this, how we come up with, like, speaking of designs, like how we come up with the design assignments, where is it coming from, how do you break down a script, because there might be that moment that you want to do your own thing. And this is a really big point too, is showrunner, in my mind, other people might view it differently, but in my mind, showrunner is a production position. You are running the show. There are creators, and of course there's numerous examples of that role, showrunner being both, right? People who are the creator and showrunner, they're called the showrunner. Tons of famous examples of brilliant people. But there's also people that showrun or are a creator, excuse me, and have a showrunner. Like, Game of Thrones is a live action example, but there's the creator and there's people who are running the show. And it is a production job. So I would behoove you that if you are wanting to create your own stuff, whether it's indie, you want to pitch your thing, you're making a pilot, like whatever have you, like your goal is to have a Cartoon Network show, or have 20 episodes of your show or something like that. Knowing how to run a production is going to help you so much, and that is knowing production. So I mean, of course, like there's my stuff, but like definitely, like there's a lot of things, workshops, there's a lot of learning the softwares, shot grid, learning how to make schedules and budgets, going to other talks from other producers. There's tons of amazing ones. There's ones that I look up to and inspired by. So like, finding that information, I hate that it's a little hard to find, but I would say if you are someone artistically minded, you do art for a living, or you want to, or anything like that, knowing production is going to make you more hireable, if I'm being very honest, because a lot of the time it's not just like amazing, this person is the best artist I've ever seen, which of course we want, and that's all of you, but it is also nice to be like, oh, this person has been on a project before, because you're working on a project, you're also working on a team. Yes, you're going to have your assignments to make the most amazing backgrounds and the most amazing character designs and all that kind of stuff, but if you know some of these processes, you know how to jump in and use the file naming conventions. Maybe you've touched shot grid before, maybe art reviews and all that kind of stuff. Like, I know it might seem like really small things that, like, oh, of course everybody knows how to do that, but like working in a team is different than working on your own thing without a deadline and stuff like that. So it's gonna help out in the long run, whether you want to work or you want to create and hopefully make the next best show.
Yeah, your point too about how sometimes you might want to split the creator role and the showrunner role is really interesting because like the skills required to pitch and like get a TV series greenlit are not necessarily the same skills that go into managing a production.
Very, very much so.
I just think that's interesting. I also wanted to ask you, as an artist or as an animation professional who's moved from LA to Europe, how has like have you noticed like differences between the culture of productions between the two places and like expectations? Do you have advice for artists and animation professionals who are making the leap?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, first thing is moving's expensive, but you all knew that. But no, I've had the best time whether it was in England. Like I used to work in LA for Irish studios. I used to work for Lighthouse Studios and Studio Mela. Love Studio Mela. Shout out them. I'm also probably to this day saying the name of their studio wrong, but that's okay. They laugh. We all laugh. But there's animation everywhere, and that's like really fun to realize because I lived in LA for 10 years and it got very expensive. And I've always had the bug to kind of like travel and go somewhere else and experience it. And you know, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I've already mentioned how like unfortunately some of these bigger studios, you know, don't animate in house a lot. Of course, there's not selfishly, but you know, production jobs are still there. Yay! Not a lot of them anymore, but you know, hopefully it gets better. But of you know, like that's the kind of culture in LA. You know, we do the pre-production and the post-production. So if you're wanting to come out to Europe and or anywhere, like there's animation, literally can't emphasize, and that's why it's fun going to Annecy, which I know is far away in France. But you're meeting people from all over the globe who are doing the same thing as you and telling different stories and all that kind of stuff. I could talk about the magic of that forever. But the differences are it is a little bit more art focused. So if you are someone like me who does production, what I have noticed is that a lot of places they have a lot less production people. So on like a TV show that has maybe a goodish budget, you know, maybe one of these ones at Bento Box or Titmouse, maybe you're on the adult kind of side. You know, you have your line producer, an associate producer, a production manager, and a production supervisor. You have those coordinators I keep mentioning. You know, you have your design coordinator, maybe you have two design coordinators, maybe you have two storyboard coordinators, one color coordinator, and then, different PAs that maybe are departmental or not. But, like, there's a group of people is what I'm getting at. I just mentioned a group of people, whether it's small or big. In Europe, I will say I've noticed that it's a lot smaller. I have consulted on some films, some like 90-minute films that, of course, are a little bit more indie, as in the funding is coming from themselves, not Netflix or Hulu or something like that. But I've seen production groups that are supposed to be 3 people, and I'm like, whoa. So sometimes artists are asked to do a bit more production, which I'm learning different, ways to kind of view that and stuff like that. I'm very much so like, we're there to help and make sure that they can do what they need to do. But I think that's something interesting that I've encountered over here as a difference is sometimes directors do a little bit more of the production work. Sometimes artists will do a little bit more of it, but the production roles tend to be a bit more scarce. But then like something I'm enjoying about that difference is teaching about production and kind of showing, what production does and how it can be useful and how it, can help artists not be stressed out from doing their own shot lists and prepping their own folders, and they're losing hours of their day doing that. It's a kind of a fun give and take and learning experience of like, I've learned so much from being in England and dipping my toes remotely into Ireland, and now I'm in Sweden. It definitely is different, but I will say I've had a much better time work-life balance in Europe. I have only worked in the US and Europe, just to be clear for everyone watching, so I can't speak for other continents and countries, but I've definitely felt the most happiest and healthiest that I've been being out of LA. It's work culture. I'm sorry.
On that happy note, we are almost out of time, but I wanted to save the most important question for last, which is where can our audience find more of your work?
Oh yeah. I have a website which I did frantically update last night because I was like, oh no, when is the last time I've looked at that? So it is just Allissoon, my name, Allissoon, like bassoon, .com. So you can go there. My classes are all there. You can see stuff that I've worked on or I am working on. Once again, I work on some of my own stuff, which I like to be creative minded. I have to hire really good artists like you guys, but I like to write stuff. I create my own shows. I work on other people's shows to hopefully get them off the ground too. So that like producing role. Yeah, and yeah, you can see all the stuff that I do. I don't know. I think that's it. Maybe there's cat photos on there. I don't know. But yeah, all that kind of fun stuff. And yeah, I'm over at BRIKK if you want to check them out. They're in Stockholm, Sweden. They're super cool. If you like Valheim, the game, we do Minecraft trailers, we do Valheim trailers, lots of really fun stuff. And then, yeah, I'm starting at Glitch in 2 weeks, which is
So
really
cool.
cool. And I'm so happy that both of those companies, BRIKK and Glitch, have made it possible for me to stay in Sweden, which I really, really love it here, even though it's snowing and I'm cold and don't have the proper winter attire, as Mike and I talked about. I'm very happy to be here, and they really supported me in that, and I'm very appreciative.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Allissoon, for taking time to talk to our audience through animation production. And I also want to thank our audience for joining us and asking really great questions. If you are interested in, or if you enjoyed today's discussion, you might also be interested in Toon Boom's instructor-led online classes. Our Harmony Foundation class teaches artists the basics and what they need to know to use Harmony Premium in a studio environment. And you can learn more at toonboom.com/training. Toon Boom has also opened up our beta program for Jump, which is our new platform for 2D character animation in games. Artists can find the detail on our website, toonboom.com, and scroll down to the banner that says Jump Beta Program. You want to click on that. Our live streams will be back in December with more interviews and art streams. So keep an eye on our feeds and be sure to tune in next time. And I think